So for the past few months, 8, 9 months, give or take, we have kind of led a charge, encouraging you to give above and beyond to help us pay off the mortgage. And we're going to be celebrating 56 years of ministry on October 15th. And we beat the deadline. We beat the deadline. So we paid off the mortgage this past week. Mary wrote the check or put it online, you know how you do it now. But we are paid in full. All right? So that's a good thing. We are excited about being able to free up some funds, not only for ministry, but taking care of the building and serving our community. So I'm just so excited to see what God's going to do with those extra finances that we have. That frees up quite a bit, so I'm excited. Also, coming up in a couple weeks, we're going to have a familiar face back in this place. Rick Matthews, a former pastor here of 38 years, so you probably know him. Some of you are related to him. So he's going to be back here bringing the word for the first time in 2+ years. So I'm excited about that because I've heard him speak at like funerals, but there's something about a celebration that'll be nice to have him back, right? To actually hear him preach. So come back here in 2 weeks. It's going to be an exciting time. We're going to continue on the life of Moses and Exodus today. So just a little bit of review, recapping what we've talked about. Now, God called Moses a shepherd to lead Israel out of Egypt. And of course, he was scared. He was intimidated by this call. And he came up with so many excuses, questioning God, thinking that he wasn't good enough. But in spite of all those different things, he eventually gave in, right? He gave in to God's call on his life. And he went to Egypt and he told Pharaoh, hey, let my people go. And guess what? Pharaoh did not. 10 plagues later, he finally gave in and released the Israelites. And then Pharaoh had a change of heart and started chasing after the Israelites. Eventually, they came up to the Red Sea. They got the Red Sea on one side. They got Pharaoh's army on the other. And they're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? We're trapped. We're sunk. We're grumbling. We're complaining. We have no idea what's going to happen. And God pulls this miracle of all miracles and splits the Red Sea. And they walk through, not just on damp ground, but on dry ground. And then God pulls off another miracle where they're having a battle with the Amalekites, and Moses raises his arms, and they defeat them. Remember when he lowered his arms, they were getting a little weaker, and the Amalekites were taking over. But then Aaron and Hur supported their arms, lifted them up, and they won again, right? It's an amazing thing what God can do when we're willing to be able to do it, to actually get out there and actually put our arms up or throw our staff up, right? It's an amazing thing what God will do and us joining in on that. Now, eventually, the Israelites get to Mount Sinai, and that's where we find ourselves this morning. They get to Mount Sinai, which they call the mountain of God because they have so many different experiences, right? They camp out there, and God meets with the Israelites. God meets with Moses on this mountain. And we find out in Exodus 19:5-6. It's kind of their charge. So let's read those verses today. Exodus 19:5-6. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Right? Basically, he's telling the Israelites, you are set apart. You are different than the rest of the world. And if you do this, you will continue to be my treasure, my treasured nation. You will be first and foremost. You will be the people that are set apart. And so, since we are talking about prayers of the church, my first prayer for the church today is that we, the church, would continue to be set apart. That we would be set apart for God's work, for what God is calling us to do. Because we are the church, right? We are called to be different, to live different in the world, to provide hope for the world. And it's interesting, the Israelites agree, right? The Israelites agreed that we will do everything the Lord has said, in verse 8. And then God turns to Moses and he says, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking to you and will always put their trust in you. That's an interesting phrase to say, right? Here God is talking to Moses and he's like, I'm going to give you some clout. I'm going to give you some trust for them to know that I meet with you. And I'm going to build up your trust within this group. Now, God wants to set up Moses for basically a successful leadership. So they can know who to go to, who they can listen to, who they can trust in good and in bad times. It's also here that God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. And he says, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything. Now I could go off and rattle off all the other 10 Commandments, but I think that's all we need for now to talk about what happens next. You see, Moses then goes back and relays it to the Israelites. And then he goes back to the mountain to hear the rest of the laws, all 613 of them. And then he goes back and relays it to the Israelites again. We see this in Exodus 24:3. And it says, they responded with one voice. Everything the Lord has said, we will do. It's pretty interesting how quickly sometimes we will say something and then do something else. Because God tells Moses to come back up the mountain and he will give him the tablet of stone. So he's going to write out the 10 Commandments on the stone this time. And this is what happens. Exodus 24:15 through 18. When Moses went up to the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the seventh day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain. And he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So he's up there quite a long time. He's on this mountain hearing from God, and God's chiseling the stone for him. And the Israelites are wondering, what's going on? They've been up there a long time. Why hasn't he come back? We're a little worried. What do we do? What are we going to do? What if Moses died up there? What is going to happen to us? What are we supposed to do? And so in Exodus 32, verse 1, they say, hey, Aaron, get over here. Come make us gods who will go before us. So Aaron's like, okay, give me your gold earrings. He takes those gold earrings and he melts them down and he fashions this calf. And you're like, what on earth is going on here? And then this is what he says. These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt. Can you imagine saying that? Can you imagine forming this thing out of something that you made and then saying, this is your God, and he's the one that brought you out of Egypt? Of course, God is witnessing this, and he's like, I'm not sure that's the way it happened, Aaron. I'm not sure this is the way it works. the last couple weeks, we have been talking about different attitudes. One of the attitude is thankfulness, right? We talked about entering his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise, right? There's something about thankfulness that helps us to get to this attitude of worship. And then we continued last week talking about supporting each other, right? When Moses' hands were tired, they came around him and they supported him. They lifted him up. We need to have an attitude of thankfulness and supporting other people. And here, instead, the Israelites are kind of forgetting everything that they were thankful for. They are forgetting to be thankful and forgetting to be supportful of each other. And I personally think these two concepts tie in together. Because if they're not being thankful, if they're not being supporting of each other, they forget where their worship is supposed to go. Who was actually saving them and rescuing them from Egypt? They forget that God actually did that. And so they misplace their trust. What is their trust in? Well, this gold. These earrings that used to dangle on their ear. Right? Like, it doesn't seem like much, but when you take it, combine it, it's this God, right? How do we form it? And how do we fashion it? What does this God do for us? And I think there's this connection that we miss out when we start to look at other things as our God. Right? Here the Israelites are shallow in their beliefs and not quite sure how to live out their faith. Because they just received the Ten Commandments, right? They just received the 613 laws. And he led with do not follow other gods. Do not put any other gods before me, right? Don't form yourself an idol. Like, those are the two that he led with. And literally the first thing they do when they see of any trouble and they don't know where Moses is and they don't know if he's coming back, they form an idol and put another god in front of them, right? They're shallow in their beliefs and not quite sure how to live out their faith. So they ask Aaron to make a calf out of gold. So we may not make gold calves ourselves. I don't think any of you have done that before. I don't think that you have bowed down to a gold idol. I don't think. Maybe there's some things going on in your homes that I don't know about. But I do believe that we're not being thankful for what God is doing, and when we're not supporting each other and encouraging each other, different things come out in us. And so when we're not being thankful, maybe we're like the Israelites, and we allow some grumbling in our lives. We allow a little bit of worry in. We maybe start gossiping instead of supporting others in a decision. And it creeps into our hearts. It creeps into our worship. And it starts to take this bigger place of our lives that is supposed to be for God. And it's starting to change us. It's starting to take over, and it might not be a golden idol, but it's something there that we're putting in front of God. And so it's changing us. It's holding us still. And I think we need to start to make or give these things bigger spaces in our heart other than worry, right? Let God have those places in our heart. Let God have your worry, right? We don't need to hold on to that. We give it over to God. Let God have your fears. Let God have your grumbling. Go take it to God. Forget about gossip. Take it to God, right? And of course, God is furious at these actions. God sees them making this idol. God sees them bowing down to this idol, saying that it's the one that rescued them from Egypt, right? Like this gold little idol saved them from Egypt. And this is his response. Exodus 32, 7 through 14. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt." I want to stop there, because it's interesting. I almost feel like here God is a parent, because I think all parents have done this before. When your child has done something wrong or has misplaced something or whatever it is, you turn to your spouse and you say, "Look what your child did." Right? That's what God's doing here. Go down because your people, right? Moses is like, "My people? What? I didn't want this job. You gave it to me. I really tried to give it up," right? I try to wash my hands of these people. They're not my people. I haven't seen them in 40 years. Right? Whom you brought out of Egypt, right? He's telling Moses he did it. God's not taking the credit for it right now. He's saying it's you. It's on you. They've become corrupt. Verse 8, it says, "They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.'" Verse 9, it says, "I have seen these people. The Lord said to Moses, and they are a stiff-necked people." Plain and simple, God is mad. He is frustrated. And he's calling them corrupt and stiff-necked. Now, I know you guys know what corrupt means. But how many of you actually know what stiff-necked means, right? It's not a phrase we use. It's not a phrase that is common to us. But back then, a farmer would use an ox. And an ox is pretty strong. An ox would have to be put a yoke on, right? A yoke would help the farmer to be able to steer the ox in which way to go, and that it wouldn't go off and do its own thing. But a stiff-necked ox might not be turning the way that the farmer wants them to go. In fact, a stiff-necked actually means obstinate, and I like the second one better, difficult to lead. So one would say that the Israelites are being difficult to lead in this situation. Sometimes being a follower is hard, right? Being a follower is hard. Now, of course, God is upset because they're not following his ways. He just literally wrote them out, and they're already not following him. And I'm sure this was very frustrating with God. Now, have you ever dealt with someone who's stiff-necked? Or maybe there's been a time where you've been stiff-necked. And you were maybe difficult to lead or obstinate, or maybe what we would say stubborn, right? I know I have. I am probably the first person to get in that line to say that I have been stiff-necked a time or two, maybe even three, right? Like I have been stiff-necked. I have been stubborn. And my prayer for the church, second prayer for the church, is that we would be obedient to God. Because people that are obedient to God are good followers. They're not difficult to lead. They are good followers. And I want to be a good follower of God, follower of Christ. You know, you may have heard a fully devoted follower of Christ. I think that's something that I want to be. I want to be a fully devoted follower of Christ. And being stubborn doesn't always lead to being a good follower. God continues in verse 10, Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. Oh my goodness, God. Like, you're talking about destroying your people. He's more than struggling with the Israelites. He wants to wipe them out and start over. And he literally just told them their commandments, and now he seems like he's done with them. He wants to wipe them out. In fact, we should have probably known that following other idols would get him like this, right? Because in the Ten Commandments, when he was telling them about it, in verse 5, Exodus 20, verse 5, he said, don't make yourself an idol and bow down to it, because what? I am a jealous God. Like don't get in between, right? Me, don't let idols get in between me and you, right? Follow me. Verse 11 continues, but Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever. Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. It's interesting. I kind of wonder, was God really planning on wiping him out? And Moses talked him out of it. Or was God just kind of talking to Moses? Knowing that he wasn't going to wipe them out, just said this to see what Moses would say. But Moses stands up for his people and says, oh, you shouldn't do that, right? Because you made a promise. You gave a covenant to our fathers, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Israel here. But Moses basically kind of talks him out of it. And God probably never planned from the beginning. He knows it from the beginning. But I think there's something about it that Moses actually goes to God and talks about it. He's an intercessor, in a way. And I think sometimes that we need to realize that no matter what we think God has decided, we can still go intercess. We can still go take it to him and hope he changes his mind. Even though maybe he has something completely different planned out in the other. But eventually Moses does go down the mountain. And he takes the stone tablets with him. He's got the stone tablets in his hand. And of course he's had this conversation with God. And he actually sees now what the Israelites are doing. And he's getting frustrated. He's getting mad. He's getting upset with them. And so what he does is he throws down the Ten Commandments. And they break. He takes the golden calf. He melts it down, turns it into powder, puts it in water, and makes the Israelites drink it. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that really helped the Israelites out in many ways. It might have woken them up, but I'm sure their digestive tract had some issues. Right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine drinking the gold? Can you imagine what that would taste like? It basically took and made their gold or their God useless. It had no more purpose. It was done. No matter what, that gold that they had melted down into an idol, it had no more use. It was going to pass through them eventually. and it was never going to be used again. It made their God or their gold useless. What once was a decorative earpiece was now fertilizer. Right? Like Exodus 33 continues on. God gives Moses some new instructions to leave this place, to go to the promised land. But he says, I'm not going to go with you because you're a stiff-necked people. You go do your thing. I'm going to do mine. Can you imagine? Now he moved on from destroying them, but now he's basically just going to abandon them. He's done. He's washing his hands. I'm done. And the Israelites finally realize what they did. Because they weren't there when Moses said, oh, don't destroy them. But they were there to hear God say, I will not go with them. They begin to mourn. They begin to realize what they have done. And Moses begins to plead for the people. Exodus 33, started with verse 12. It says, Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. What a good line, right? My presence will go with you. In other words, God's given in again. Moses intercedes again, and God's saying, okay. And I like how he says, I will give you rest, right? What is rest? It's not necessarily a nap. It's not an 8-hour night of sleep. It's peace. It's this comfort that only God can give. In verse 15 it says, Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see my face and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Right? God and Moses have had so many experiences together. They have gotten pretty close over the last few months. They've gotten pretty tight. Moses had been with him for 40 days and 40 nights on this mountain inside this dense cloud, which is the very presence of God. And now God's saying, I'm going to pass in front of you. You're not going to see my whole self. You're going to see my backside. You'll see my back. I'll let you see it. Because if I show you everything else, I show you my face, you will not live. You know, Moses has all these stories, pretty much enough to write a book. Maybe we'll call it Exodus, right? All these stories that God has blessed him and challenged him and encouraged him along the way. But I think there's still one more story that is so amazing. In chapter 34, verse 6, it says, Then the Lord came down in a cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name. The Lord and he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. It says, Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. Lord, he said, if I have found favor in your eyes, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. Then the Lord said, I am making a covenant with you before all your people. I will do wonders never before known or before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome it is that I, the Lord, will do for you. Right? Moses came down the mountain changed. Forever and absolutely changed. It says the face of Moses was radiant. When the Israelites viewed his face, they trembled because of his face. It shone. It represented God. And how Moses feared God, right? When he first saw that burning bush and turned away from that burning bush, like that's what people were doing with Moses and his face. They were turning away from Moses' face because it was God's presence that they noticed from his radiance. And I wonder today if the church could be one thing for this world. My last prayer for this series is that my prayer for the church is that we be radiant. That when people look at us, not that they would fear, but they would be in awe. That they would revere God. That they would see in us God. And they would know that something just needs to change. And there's something about this radiance that calls Moses to just a whole nother level and the Israelites to a whole nother level. You see, Moses would never have been radiant if he wasn't set apart. And he never would have been set apart if he wasn't first obedient. You see, it came with that set apartness. It came with that obedience that he was able to become radiant. That people would see God in him. You see, the presence of God was all over his face. The provision of God was all over his face. Moses was different because of the time he spent with God. And I wonder if we're different. I wonder if we're different because of the experiences that we've had with God. I wonder if when people look at us, they see a little bit of God. He's different. He's set apart. He's obedient. There's something about that I want. I wonder if the world is looking at us and they see Jesus. Or if they just see Mary or Jim or Aaron. Who do they see when they look at us? See, Moses was different because of the time he spent with God. The experiences that he had with God transformed him. In fact, he eventually put on a veil. So he'd cover it up so people could actually look at him. It hindered him so much. Does God's provision and presence change you? Are you spending time with God on a regular basis? Are you soaking up His presence, whether it's here on a Sunday or during the week on a Tuesday when maybe we don't have anything going on? Do you read His Word and just soak it in, or do you read it and like, oh, I checked a mark off the list, put it away, I'll do that again tomorrow or next week or whenever it is, how often you do it? Is it something that you do out of duty or tradition or because you feel like you must to be a good Christian? Or is it something that you long, like when you're done with your devotion during the day, you long to even be more with God? And so you start taking God along with you every day. That He's changing you so much that you're just having this conversation with Him no matter where you're at. Some people would call that practicing the presence of God. A.W. Tozer. Right? Like there's something about it. There's something about God that changes us. I read this quote this morning on a meme someone shared on Facebook. But 1 out of 100 will read a Bible, right? Maybe more, I don't know. They just probably made the statistic up. 1 out of 100 will read a Bible. The other 99 will read you and me. Hopefully we are an accurate translation. I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward. As they do, let's pray. Lord, you are so good. We need to know your word. We need to know you. We need to be in your presence. We need to soak up you. You provide so much, and it's so easy to overlook what you do. It's so easy to not be thankful. It's so easy to not support. It's so easy to grumble and complain. It's so easy to gossip. It's so easy to be stubborn and stiff-necked, to not be easy to be led. But Lord, there is something that when your presence and your provision comes in and we recognize it and we're thankful, not only for you, but for the people that you've placed in our lives, that we see each other and that we support each other, that we encourage each other, that we love each other, that we smile and we laugh together and we fellowship, where we break bread together, where we do all these things because we're just so overwhelmed by your presence. So grateful and thankful for who you are and what you've done and what you're doing, and even looking forward to what you're going to do in our lives. That there's this radiance about us, that people see you. Lord, we are called to be a team. To be a team that is loving, that is living, that is serving like you, like Jesus. And we want people to see Jesus in us. So Lord, fill us as we go out today in our own different directions, to our homes and to our workplaces and to our schools. As we're going to different places, may people see you in us. We love you, we pray in your name. Amen.